Noah and the flood!
Adam and Eve had to leave the Garden of Eden and settle in a new place.
Yes, because they sinned. They went their own way instead of God's way.
Yep, and after a while they had kids. And then their kids had kids.
Grandkids!
And their grandkids had great-grandkids. Then the great-great-grandkids had kids. And as all those people spread around the world, something else was spreading too. Sin. People were choosing their own way instead of God's way. Fighting, stealing, lying and hurting each other, and making God's world a very ugly place. Until finally, God said,
Enough! It's time to start over.
Start over? How?
God picked one person to start his world over again.
Noah!
Noah was a righteous man. He tried very hard to make right choices. In a world where everyone was doing their own thing, Noah was always ready to do what God asked. He had been practicing listening to God and being obedient for a long time. More than 500 years.
How could anyone be that old?
People lived a long time back then. Are you all right?
I was thinking about the candles on his birthday cake.
I see. So God said to Noah,
I want you to build a boat.
What's a boat?
A thing you can float in if there's a flood.
What's a flood?
It's when water covers everything. It's why you need a boat.
How big?
Big enough for your family and some animals.
How many animals?
All of them. 2 of every kind.
Then God gave him plans for building the big boat.
Noah was already so old. Building a boat that big would take a long time.
Right. It took Noah and his family years and years and years.
Hey, Dad, are we done yet?
Not yet.
Now are we done?
Nope.
On top of that, Noah's neighbors probably came by to laugh at him.
So it's called a boat. And it's for floating on water?
Yep.
There's no water anywhere.
Poor Noah. He was just doing what God told him.
Yes, he wanted to be God's friend even if everyone else thought he was silly. Finally, one day, a drop fell from the sky.
Hey,
Then another, and another, and another. And then,
The animals started to come?
yep, God sent them to Noah, and Noah packed them all into his big, big boat.
Now are we done?
Then God closed the door.
We are.
The rain continued to come down, harder and harder. Suddenly, having a boat looked like a pretty good idea. The water rose higher and higher. God covered the land with water so that all the fighting and hurting died. But so did most of God's creation.
That's sad.
It was very sad. It rained and poured for 40 days. And Noah's big, big boat floated on the water 50 days, 60 days, 100 days, 150 days.
That is a long time.
It was. Then, finally, the water started to go down, 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 down. Until one day, Noah's big, big boat came to rest on top of a mountain. And God said,
Let's start again.
so Noah and his family, plus a bunch of seasick animals, walked out of the big, big boat into a clean, fresh world.
I have placed a rainbow in the sky as my promise that I will never again flood the earth.
It was time to start again.
Once upon a time, after a big flood had washed the earth clean, people everywhere spoke the same language. They found a nice flat land in a place called Shinar and decided to settle there. Imagine everyone being neighbors, understanding each other perfectly, like one big family. One day, the people had a big idea. Let's build a city with a tower that reaches up to the sky. It'll be so tall it'll touch the clouds, they said, excited to start. They used bricks instead of stones and sticky tar for glue. Everyone worked together, passing bricks and mixing tar, laughing and dreaming about their sky-high tower. But then, something unexpected happened. God looked down from heaven and saw the city and the tall tower. Look at them, all speaking the same language, working together on this big project. If they can do this, they'll think they can do anything. They're forgetting that some things are meant for God alone. So, God decided to mix things up a bit. Suddenly, when one person asked for a brick, another handed them a shovel. When someone needed more tar, they got a bucket of water instead. It was like everyone had started speaking in riddles. Confused and frustrated, they couldn't work together anymore. The tower that was supposed to reach the sky was left unfinished. Because they couldn't understand each other, people started to drift apart, forming smaller groups with those they could communicate with. These groups traveled far and wide, finding new places to live. The big family was scattered across the earth, each group speaking its own new language. They traveled far, to places where no one had lived before. Each group found new lands with mountains, rivers, and forests. They built new homes, using what they had learned, but this time, they respected their limits. The world was filled with a rainbow of languages, each as beautiful and complex as the next. In these new lands, people's lives took on new colors and shapes. They dressed in different clothes, sang different songs, and told different stories under the stars. Children grew up learning how to say hello and I love you in their own special language. They learned from the land and the animals, and they celebrated the seasons in their own ways. In the end, the story of the Tower of Babel shows us that it's important to remember we're not all powerful and that God has plans we might not understand. God made us all different, with many languages and ways of living, making the world a more interesting place. When we learn to listen and understand each other, we make not just buildings, but friendships that God smiles upon.
God calls Abram.
God had given people another chance to live the right way. And sadly, people kept choosing the wrong way.
Oh no, that's really bad.
It was. Once again, the world was sick with sin. People were fighting, cheating, lying, hurting each other, and ignoring God. And on top of that,
Yes?
people were building bigger and bigger cities with more people doing more bad things.
So, did God send another flood?
Oh no, God had promised not to flood the whole world again.
So, what did God do to stop sin this time?
He asked someone to help.
Who did he ask?
From one of the biggest cities, a place called God called a man.
Abram.
Abram. You may know him as Abraham because later God changed his name. He lived in with his family. And when I say family, I don't just mean his mom and dad.
So, who did he live with?
Abram lived with his mom, dad, sisters, brothers, nephews, nieces, granddads, grandmas, uncles, aunts, cousins, second cousins, third cousins. Well, you get the picture.
That sure sounds crowded.
It probably was. But you see, in those days, it was good to live in a big group.
Why?
Because if you were in a big group, it was harder for other groups to hurt you or take over your land. People didn't go out on their own. They stuck together in large families for protection.
I get it.
So that's what Abram did. Until
Until?
one day when God spoke to him.
Oh, Abraham,
Yes? Yes. Are you calling to me, God?
I want you to do something.
Yes. Sure. Of course.
I want you to go out on your own.
What?
At this point, Abram didn't know much about God. Back then, people didn't have Bibles like we do,
Why not?
because the Bible hadn't been written yet. So he didn't have all the stories we have today that show us how trusting God is the best thing to do. So when God said,
I want you to go out on your own. I want you to leave your family and follow me.
Abram was faced with a choice. Would he stay with his family where things were safe, or would he trust that God had a plan?
What did he do?
Well, Abram said,
Yes. I will do as you are asking me to do.
so Abram, along with his wife,
Sarai.
you may know her as Sarah, because later on God changed her name too. They left their big family and country
Goodbye.
and wandered off into the middle of nowhere, following God. And then one night,
Abraham,
Huh?
Abraham, you have done as I asked. You have trusted me.
Yes, I did.
As you follow me, I will be with you always. You will never be alone.
Oh, really? That's wonderful.
Not only that, I have 3 promises for you. I'm going to give you so many kids and grandkids and great-grandkids that your family will become a nation.
A nation?
a nation is a big group of people that live in a very large place.
So God promised to make Abraham's family?
A great nation. Yes.
Wow!
But wait, there's more. God also promised Abram that his family would have their own land, and that the whole world would be blessed through Abram and his kids.
Double wow! Triple wow! 3 promises!
There was only one problem.
Really? What?
Abram and Sarai were old, and they didn't have any kids.
Oh, so how could they become a big family and a great nation when they didn't have kids?
Because of the one who called them out in the first place.
God?
Yes, God had called Abram and Sarai to follow him, and they did. Because they trusted God, he promised to make them a great and special nation that would bless the whole world.
But what was the blessing?
Abram and Sarai didn't quite know yet. They had to keep trusting God. It was years and years before Abram and Sarai started seeing God's promises come true. And it all began with a little baby boy named Isaac, who came when they least expected it.
Abram loved God, and God blessed him. He was a very rich man. He had lots and lots of different herds: cattle, sheep, goats, camels, and donkeys. He also had lots of servants to care for his possessions. God had also blessed him with much silver and gold. After leaving Egypt, Abram traveled back to Bethel with his wife Sarah and nephew Lot. He went back to where he had built an altar to the Lord before his adventures in Egypt. At this altar, Abram worshipped God. By now, Abram and Lot both had so many sheep, goats, and cows that there wasn't enough room for them to live peacefully together. Their shepherds even started fighting. There was not enough space for all those animals to feed in the same fields of grass or to drink from the same wells of water. To make things worse, Abram and Lot weren't the only people in the land. The Canaanites and the Perizzites also lived in the area, and they needed grass and water for their flocks and herds too. Imagine how crowded the land was getting. So Abram said to Lot, "Let's not fight. We don't want to have bad feelings between us because of our animals. We're family." So Abram gave Lot a choice. He said, "There's a lot of land not too far from here. Let's separate, and you can choose first. If you choose to go to the land on the left, then I'll go to the land on the right. But if you take the land on the right, then I will take the land to the left." Lot looked all around. He saw the Jordan Valley and thought it was so beautiful. It looked like the Lord's garden with plenty of water. So Lot chose to go towards the Jordan Valley, while Abram settled in the land of Canaan. Lot traveled to the east with his cattle, sheep, goats, camels, and donkeys. He ended up right next to a city called Sodom. The people of Sodom were very proud, lazy, and wicked. God saw that they weren't merciful. Even though they had plenty for themselves, they wouldn't share with anyone who was poor. They thought only about their own happiness and not about doing what was right according to God. After Lot left, the Lord spoke to Abram again. God reminded Abram of the great promises he had given him before. God said, "Now look all around you to the north, south, east, and west. I will give you all this land as far as you can see. It will be for you and for your children forever." God promised Abram that he would have many, many children throughout the ages. He would have so many children that no one would be able to count all of them, just like no one can count the dust on the earth. God commanded Abram, "Go and walk around on the land that you see, for I am going to give it all to you." So Abram obeyed God and moved his tent to Hebron. There he built another altar to the Lord. And God changed his name from Abram, which means exalted father, to Abraham, meaning father of a multitude. This was because Abraham would have so many children throughout the ages of history.